And I had a little scare tonight. I thought my book didn't make it back from the retreat because I had pulled it apart from the rest of the books and shoved it in another pocket. I was running around my room thinking to myself, now, how am I going to explain to everybody that I don't have a book? But at long last, voila, the book, The Imitation of Christ. And we are on page 62. And the chapter is called The Amendment of Our Whole Life. Giving our whole life to the divine, amending our whole way of being. And, I've been thinking about quite a few things in the last couple of weeks, but one of the things in my vlog that I talked about yesterday was this notion of God as principle, that God is a principle, unchanging, unmoving, the principle of Satchitananda, the principle of love, wisdom, and being. And that, his power is that anything that, reverberates that in the moment itself reverberates that principle. And we should live from the impetus of the principle within us and not from the impetus of mind or thoughts or history of self, that all of that is projected on everything. And that is how we return to the Christ within, to the beloved within, is by being a spontaneous reverberation of the divine principle that is the image of God that's within us, which is spontaneous and requires no thought, no calculation, no preparation. It's merely encountering the moment and letting the moment strum the chords, as it were, of that divine principle of Satchitananda, love, wisdom, and being. All three of which can be found in the Bible as descriptions of God. So we're down on verse 3, and he starts by saying, the prophet David tells us, put your trust in the Lord and do good, that you may dwell in the land and be secure. One thing holds many back from spiritual advancement and earnest amendment, and that is the fear and dislike of the effort and the difficulties involved in the struggle. All right, so that first part there, put your trust in the Lord. What does that mean? Put your trust, if we're going to follow through with this idea of the divine as principle, it means put your trust in the principle, put your trust in love, wisdom, and being, as being the source or the source and the impetus of all action. Not to put your trust in the mind as an identity, not to believe your history as your identity, not to believe your experience as your identity, but to be established in yourself as a living principle, which is the name of the Lord, the divine within. And so if we do that, we will naturally do good, because it's the reverberation of that principle of love and wisdom that is virtue, that will take us forward, because virtue really is our nature, which is why it's such a lauded quality and why it's something that we try and develop. Even in our state of believing we're mind, we still try and comb our mind with the idea of virtue so that we can be closer to our ideal, to that which is familiar to us, even if it's not at a conscious level. And to live according to that ideal will give us a great deal of satisfaction in life. That's how we live a fulfilling life. So he said that one thing holds us back in this spiritual advancement, and that's fear. I was just sharing that I find this to be very true, that whenever I have a breakthrough or move ahead in a new insight or a new understanding in my spiritual life, there's always this pullback from the mind. It's almost a panic. The mind senses something quite dangerous to it, something that kind of threatens it as the source of my sense of self. And it just, digs in all of its hooves and I can't drag that donkey anywhere. And I lose a day or two. I kind of have to go into a hibernation to, as I get that kind of pushback. Um, so that fear that we get when we approach the truth, which is the diminishment of ego, and the ego, as you know, that's the what do you call it? The byproduct of our attachment, the byproduct of our identity with mind and body is egoism. And we move our sense of I into that, into the world of changing. And when our I is established there, there's an insecurity, there's a fear associated with that. And so spiritual life can give us a bit of fear, kind of a bit of trepidation when we feel the foundations of what we're identified with shake or shift. And that we grab on to the nearest familiar thing to say, this is who I am. And we just get ourselves buoyed up by it. So one holds back from spiritual advancement and earnest amendment through fear and dislike of the effort. Hopefully that's not a dislike of any effort, but that dislike of having to sit and behave ourselves, for our practice of having to bring the mind constantly back to a single thought of the name of God, or in prayer to stay focused on the presence of the beloved. That practice, also staying in the light, staying in a state of inward honesty, where we're dealing with our life as it really is and not living in a world of pretense and ignorance, where we ignore our shortcomings and just kind of accept them as part of ourselves, and take that fake idea of grace just to cover it, to give us license to be as we are and to be comfortable. When grace can make us comfortable, but grace is not properly received if it doesn't come with inspiration to do the right thing. If it's missing the inspiration component of it, then there's not a real understanding of grace. Grace has just become another form of ignorance at that level. So if you say, oh, I've been covered by grace, I can live like I want, you don't understand grace, and you're in trouble. You're living in a self-delusion, because grace understood, grace truly accepted, produces a welling up of love, a welling up of gratitude, a welling up of inspiration, to be like our ideal, our beloved. And so fear and dislike of the effort and difficulties involved in the struggle, right? That constant application of having to stand up and try again, of having to go, to get back on the horse when we fall off, and, sticking to our goals, to get up on time in the morning, to sit and do our practice, and to stay aware of the divine, and to keep all of our commitments going, to not start rounding corners, not to start getting lazy. Yet those who attain surpassing virtue, so this is a promise, those attain surpassing virtue who struggle bravely against the very things which they find hardest and most repugnant to them. That's a promise right there, that you will attain surpassing virtue by sticking to the fight, sticking to the effort. Even though you're sitting there struggling and just feeling like you're about to die, if you have to meditate for one more minute, you don't give up. You wait until the timer goes off, or you wait until, you take it to the end. And if you're in a real mood of dispassion, you'll do an extra 5 minutes, to counter that feeling, just to shake your finger at the mind for being so ornery and trying to pull you away. And so sticking to all of this, if you do that, if you struggle bravely, if you keep going forward, and our bravery, again, is anchored in our faith in grace, in our faith in divine love, a love that is ours as an heir, not ours to beg, but to know that it's a safe assumption that we have God's love, that we have God's acceptance, that God is with us. And so we root ourselves in that confidence, and that becomes our bravery as we struggle forward. For a person profits most and gains the most, grace is precisely in the area where the difficulties are the greatest and require the most mortification, the most sacrifice, the most self-control. You know, that I don't know about the most, but any of that together moves you toward an awareness of God. You know, to struggle to keep the mind quiet has its own gift built into it, as really do all spiritual struggles. Mother doesn't leave us alone. There is any effort that we make, you really can feel that God has done significantly more. That, you know, the scriptures say that for every one step we take toward God, He takes 10 toward us. Ramakrishna says, I've done, 15/16 of all of the work. You just do the last remaining 16th, just that little bit. And you just go forward in that way. And that you will, you'll profit most and get the most gain in your virtue and in your understanding and in your confidence in that divine love and in your divine nature. Once you start aligning with the divine will, which is your own highest will, your own purified will, there's a wonderful amount of confidence in there. There's no doubt in there. When you are in alignment, and there's a lot of joy in that state. There's a lot of security in that state, because it's a state of oneness, a state of union, a state of harmony in the divine will. Certain it is that all persons do not have the same difficulties to overcome and mortify. Clearly, we've all got our own pet problems that we are holding on to. Nevertheless, those who ardently love God, right? Those who ardently love peace, love wisdom, love being, those who ardently hold on to that divinity, even though their passions are stronger than those of others, right? So even if you're struggling more than others with your vices or with your struggles, look at Girish. What a beautiful example he is of that. He had those struggles. He humiliated himself many times by showing up drunk in front of the devotees and stumbling into Thakur's room and bad mouthing him or disrespecting him on some levels. And yet he kept coming back, and yet he kept working and eventually became a saint because of it. And so that's the spirit we want. It's that constant love of the beloved, that constant desire to be in that presence, to be in alignment with that nature, that principle within us. So those who ardently love God, even though their passions are stronger than those of others, will be better able to grow in virtue than those with good habits and fewer passions, but who are less fervent in pursuing holiness. So this is really something, that's one of the things Jesus says is he who had, what is that? He who has been forgiven much loves much, right? So though that person who really struggles and understands that they are forgiven, understands that grace has them covered, they have a greater advantage in spiritual life. They get catapulted farther ahead. For those people, raised in a tradition, so that tradition has become something normal to them. It's sort of just like regular life. Sometimes they lack that zeal of the new convert, to talk in Christian terms. We used to talk about that in church all the time, the difference between the lifers and the converts. The lifers, sometimes you just had to really stick them to both diodes on a car battery to get them to do anything, and and those youngsters, you had to nail them to the pew every now and then to keep them from getting up and jumping and running around, and so have that kind of love of God. It's the innocence of seeing the moment for the first time always. When you let go of memory and story and egoism, what's left is a child of the divine. What's left is that pureness, that sweetness, because that's the principle. That's the vibration of the divine principle within. And living in that light, oh, doggone it, that's just the best part of life for us. It's the times when we're the happiest, the times when we're most fulfilled, the times when we have the greatest sense of depth and faith in being. Two things which you need to make real progress are: you must withdraw yourself from those things to which you are prone by nature. You have to detach. You have to discern. Those things that are just your special little subset of troubles. Those attachments that are special to you. We've got to push against them. We have to discern. Now, we don't battle them as such. I don't understand that as being the way. I think at one point in your spiritual life, you have to battle them because you just don't understand even what is meant by just withdrawing from them, from withdrawing from mind, letting go of story. We're still very self-identified, meaning identified with our story of egoism. And in that condition, you do have to fight. You do, because you're in the mind and you're at the moment helplessly within the mind, because the practice hasn't really given you that wiggle room through discernment. You haven't really paid enough attention to the architecture of your inner world. And so you're still very mixed up with mind and body. You can't really sort yourself out from it. And so at that point, it is kind of a fighting, a struggle. But when you come to the point of knowing or of understanding the idea of withdrawing from mind, when you know where the boundaries of the mind are, what its effects are within you, and you can see it as separate, and you can see it separate from the body, and you understand where the body is rooted and where its ideas arise from within, then you have that wiggle room inside. You can withdraw from mind, and it short circuits the whole battle. You don't even pay attention to the subject matter of the thoughts. It's not like you go and battle lust. You don't. You simply withdraw from mind. You just withdraw from mind and anchor on the divine principle. Anchor on the presence of the divine. You hold on to that divine principle and allow it to vibrate in harmony with the moment and express, become the action, become the thought, become the movement in the moment, spontaneously, rather than being anchored in the mind, where the mind is constantly calculating the best outcome for you, the most advantageous outcome for you. So really the best way to battle your senses is through inner discernment, which then allows you to withdraw, pull yourself away from mind, in the same way that Turiyananda talked about. I guess now it's a boil that he was getting cut on his back. He could withdraw his sense from the body, withdraw his identity from the mind, and through that would not be aware of the pain, or would not suffer from the pain. And so that is an ability that we have to return to our real nature, which is what that is about. When you pull out of mind, out of the world of change, when you pull out of the body, what you are left with is that silence, that reverberating temple chamber, as it were, where the divine principle resides, where the presence of God resides. And in there, when you are in there, you are untouched from the mind. The mind's not arguing with you. It's not pulling to you. It's not presenting you with tempting ideas. Because when you withdraw from it, you withdraw your interest in it. And the mind does this funny thing. When you withdraw interest from it, it quiets down. Because that interest from you comes in the form of me and mine. And that's an unnatural thought to a human being. That's not part of our nature. The thoughts of me and mine are a delusion. And so when you introduce those wrong ideas to the mind is infected. It's disturbed. That's why we call it an impure mind. It has a virus, the virus of me and mine in it. And so it becomes very active. Thoughts start generating spontaneously, many of them contradictory, and they just swirl around in the head because you've thrown a rock in the creek. And now the water has to change its peaceful flow to a big bubbly, gurgly one. So the two things which you need, one, to make real progress are, one, you must withdraw yourself from those things that you are prone to by nature and strive for the particular virtue you most need, right? And this one, I'm going to take a little bit of a different road again to kind of, this one is fighting from within the mind, where you're looking at subject matter. I'm going after this virtue, as if you have to acquire virtues one at a time, like that. Because within this context of the Christian tradition, they have to talk about that, because when they talk about your nature, they talk about your nature as being fallen. And so they talk as if you don't have the image of God within as the source and center of your real self. And so they can't talk about that nature manifesting, because they don't credit it as being there. They credit your nature as being of a fallen nature. And so you have to then work to acquire virtues, to acquire godlike thoughts and ideas and godlike being. But that's not an accurate perspective, because they only consider Adam and Eve post-fall and say that that is their nature. But in fact, their nature was established in them before the fall, where they had the image of God placed within them. And so that image of God that's within us just needs to be allowed to manifest. We need to remove egoism out of its way so that it naturally, spontaneously puts off love and wisdom into the moment as it encounters the moment of change, right? And so we have to focus on that. And then virtue is ours by nature. It's not a set of behaviors that we're practicing and get good at. That's a big mistake to think that way, because you become a glad-hander then. You become a hypocrite, frankly. You become a great actor. In church, you're very sweet, you're real friendly, and you're real nice. And then as soon as no one's around, you're stabbing each other in the back. It's like, because you're not being authentic to your divine nature. You're still living in an ego space where the ego is afraid and constricted and constantly protecting itself through gossip, through judgment, through belittling others, through all of those things. But what we do is not practice virtues to acquire virtue. We practice inner silence. We practice being in the presence, so that image of God then can be heard and seen in our actions, because it's not being translated or diverted through egoism, through wrong thinking. Use all occasions for your spiritual gain, right? Use all occasions. Use all of your time for your spiritual gain. To study, to read, if you've got free time, just sit there and enjoy the divine a little bit. And you can do this in different ways. You can sort of, it's tough if we think that, oh gosh, well, God, it means all my day has to be spent on doing, good things that are boring. Oh my God, I can only read the Bible all day, or read Holy Scripture all day, or I'll sit and meditate all day. No. Be friends with the beloved all day. That's all. So if you're having a coffee break, enjoy your coffee break. But sit there in the company of the divine as you sip your cup of coffee. Watch your favorite program, but do it with the awareness of the beloved with you. Those things that you would poke your mom in the arm and laugh about on the screen, poke, talk more, and laugh about it. Bring the divine into relationship with your daily life. That presence is what reverberates with the inner image of the beloved. That's what the value as if that's not self-evident. But the value of remembering God is that it reverberates with your nature inside, activates your divine nature inside, and allows you to be what you are in earnest, to be what you are in sincerity, in authenticity, spontaneously. So that's our goal, not to have a list of virtues that we've acquired by practicing them, right? In the beginning, it looks like that, and we have to discipline ourselves because we don't know what they're talking about otherwise. But after some time of practice, when we get the understanding that the divine image is within us, and we get to understand that we are not the mind and not the body, but that we are actually this divine image, but that the divine image can't be seen, can't be looked at, can't be studied because it's behind the senses. You know, it's the one that produces all of that. And so it's the source of everything. So it can't see itself, just like we can't see our face. And so it has to be intuited through withdrawal from the things that we can see, from as the Christian like to talk about it in this book, all created things. We withdraw from all created things, which is the same as the Vedanta saying body mind. We withdraw from body mind because those are the changing things, those are the created things, those are the manifestations of the power of God. All right, I don't know, I keep taking off my glasses for some reason, but right. So use all occasions for your spiritual gain by being in the presence of God always. That's the short circuit there. If you observe good example, follow it. And if you see a bad example, take care not to do the same. If you have already fallen into this fault, work to correct it quickly. As your eye observes others, be sure that you are also observed by them. That's that inner awareness. For the Jnani, when they talk about being aware of being aware, that means being aware of the presence of God within. And that is that divine attention that we've talked about in other, well, actually that's in the Philokalia that comes up quite a bit. That divine attention, that divine awareness, ever watchful inside, ever watchful to the inner architecture. You know, that's kind of a new thing that I'm starting to emphasize because I've just myself have learned in the last 6 months or so how utterly important it is to be inside and to be aware of that architecture, how you are put together. You have to understand in a real world way what it means to not be body, right? You have to be able to see that clearly inside through the practice of discernment. You know, so when you touch, you can do different things. Sit there and be still with no movement, and then feel movement, become aware of feeling, and identify what are those feelings and where are those feelings, you know, and what are the nature of those feelings from the body. And then the same thing with the mind, you know, when you have no thought, get a good sense of what that is, and then feel what it is when a thought begins to form. You know, be paying attention when your first desire begins to form. Learn how that feels. Learn where that came from within yourself, so that when it happens the next time, you can be instantly triggered by it, instantly aware of it. And then you can withdraw from it. You can say, there's that thought that always gets me attached. There's that thought that increases my desire. There's that feeling that leads to a thought that gets me caught in a desire. And so we become intimately aware with that inner landscape, so that we can see the enemy, as it were, see the enemy coming along, excuse me, long before it becomes a problem, long before it brings too many friends for us to fight, for us to stand against. And so that's where that withdrawal is the best. If you withdraw from thought, no temptation can exist. You know, if you withdraw from thought, no lust can exist. No desire can mature. It's just simply withdrawing from thought. And that's the point of the mantra. We take refuge in the name, take refuge in God, right? So that when we feel the mind pulling us, we give it a biscuit. And that biscuit is the name of God. Here, chew on this for a while. Stop bothering me. So toss the mind a dog bone and send it outside to sit on the porch for a while. So that's how we withdraw. We give the mind the name and say, here, go chew on that, leave me alone. Right? And we use beads for the same reason, to get the body involved in the process always. Here, take these. Do that for a while. Leave me alone. All right. Work to correct it quickly. As your eye observes others, be sure that you are also observed by them, within that awareness. What an inspiration to see religious people devout and fervent in the love of God, courteous and self-disciplined. Exactly. Not just people of God. It'd be nice to see anybody like that. We're all people of God. No, not a single person exists outside of God. God is present in all. It's just the person's awareness of that, or the person's surrender to that varies. But it is a beautiful thing for you as a spiritual seeker to actually look like a spiritual seeker, to actually seem like you love, that you care, that you're compassionate, that you're forgiving, that you're not stuck on things. You're not haughty. You don't delight in others being dishonored. You don't talk about their faults. You don't highlight their faults. You always hope. You always believe. You always trust. You're just a number one cheerleader for everybody in spiritual life, for everybody out there who's trying, even in the slightest way, whether they're aware of it or not, to manifest love. We as spiritual people are right there, just encouraging that, just loving that, just bringing attention to it, not the other way around. We're not focusing on thoughts. We're not focusing on negative issues. We're not looking at people's problems directly. We're looking at them first to see the divine presence within them. That's what we do first. We recognize the presence of God in each other. And then we allow our divine principle to manifest accordingly. We allow it to happen by being free of ego. So what an inspiration to see religious persons devout and fervent in the love of God, courteous and self-disciplined. On the other hand, how sad to see those whose lives are disorderly and who do not practice those things to which they are called. How detrimental it is for us to neglect the purpose of our calling and to divert our minds to things that are not our concern, right? Things on pretty much anything the mind wants to think about is not really our concern, aside from the name of God. It's kind of a new practice that I've started doing, like when my mind wonders how much money is in the bank, which it does every now and then. I turn to it, and I used to go pick up my app and find out. Now I tell myself, that's none of your business. You've surrendered that to the mother. It's none of your business how much money you've got in the bank. Or if I wonder what's going to become of my life, do I stay here in Colorado or do I move somewhere else? Should I do this or should I do that? I also tell my mind, that's none of your business. Your business is to be here now and to be fully in the presence and fully aware. And mother will take you where she wants. She'll pay your bills when she's ready. And you just keep your mind in the light. You just stay present in the presence. That's your only job, your only responsibility. Do it. Go forward with it and stay in that space. So when anything else comes up, when I give a class and afterwards I'm wondering, oh gosh, I hope that class was all right. If I catch myself saying that, I'm like, mind, that's none of your business. That's mother's class. When I wonder how what the devotees are thinking of me, mind, that's none of your business. They are the mother's devotees. They are the divine's devotees. That's not your concern. When I wondered how the retreat went, I had to tell my mind, it's none of your business. That was mother's work. That's not your own. And so you just return to what your most important thing is, to be thinking of the presence of love within yourself always, and always bringing yourself back to the silent peace of being and allowing God to manifest through you. Keep in mind your commitment. Yes, don't let go. Don't be beaten. Keep in mind your commitment. Place yourself before the image of Christ crucified and see if you are not ashamed when looking into his life that you have done so little to model your life on his. Okay, we're going to change the tack on that one. This is shame-based and fear-based, which is coming from the institution and not from the divine. He says, keep your mind on your commitment. Yes, keep your mind on God. That's your commitment. Your commitment is to keep your mind in the presence, in the light, and to stay aware of your inner world. Place yourself before the image of Christ crucified. Yes, place yourself before the image of your highest, in the company of your highest ideal, in the company of the divine. That's what that is. To place yourself in front of Christ crucified, if you want to place it that way. They always do that because guilt is the first reaction, because you place yourself in the presence of Christ crucified, and then they tell you, you did that.
Yeah.
And what's going to come from that? Put yourself in the presence of the beloved, the presence of the love of God that was willing to give himself for your freedom, for your growth, for your success. You put yourself in the presence of something beautifully positive. Don't put yourself in the presence of this kind of guilt, because that's not of service to God. Because to feel guilty is to refuse the grace that was given to you in that sacrifice. To feel guilty is to not trust the adequacy of grace. So it's nonsense to put yourself in a situation where guilt or shame is produced. Definitely don't do the things that make you guilty or shameful. But if you have, don't hold on to them by keeping the shame and the guilt while you're in the presence of the beloved. How can you do that? That's a lack of faith in the nature of God. God is love. God always hopes, always believes. God keeps no record of wrongs. So don't be pulled by this kind of language. See it in the positive way. Look into his life. Yes, if we look into the life of God, we should look in and find inspiration. We should look in and find a constant flowing message of divine love in there. You don't compare it and say, oh, look how little I've done in response to it. That may be the case, but we don't keep our eyes on that. If you keep your eyes on your failures, you're just going to stew in your failures. What kind of inspiration will you ever become? If you sit there stewing on your failures and looking at Christ and saying, oh God, look, it makes me look terrible. I'm terrible. I'm horrible. No, we look at Christ and we cheer, we laud that success. We laud that beauty. And we remind ourselves that we are equally beautiful in our true nature, that we are equally virtuous, even as to the Christ in our divine nature, that we have to just surrender to that greatness, to that beauty, to that wonder, accept that grace and stop counting on our own behavior and our own efforts. Get rid of the pride of accomplishment in our spiritual practice, in our spiritual life. We depend on the presence of God alone, right? And that will silence the mind. And in that silence, we will be that image of God, right? Those who will meditate devoutly on the life and passion of our Lord will find there all that is necessary for them and will not have to look further. Perfect. There it is. They should have just replaced that previous paragraph with that right there. Those who will meditate devoutly on the life and passion of our Lord will find there all that is necessary for them and will not have to look any further. You see, that's the whole of it. God is enough. Take refuge in that alone. Don't take refuge in the worldly things that distract you from your pain. Take refuge in the light that exposes it and burns it out of you. Have that dedication. Sit there in front of the Lord when it hurts. It hurts. It hurts a lot, when you've been unfaithful, or when you've wandered off the path a bit, or gone into some of your distractions. It hurts. It does. But you sit there and remind yourself of grace. That's the work. You sit there and surrender to the perfection of God within you. That's where the work is. You sit there until you can wrap yourself in grace and not feel that shame and not be subject to that, to that pain. Right? God is our salve. He's the burning cream. he's the stick of butter when you burn your finger in the candle. So, if Jesus crucified were often in our hearts, how quickly we would learn all the things we need to know. Yes, certainly the Jesus crucified, yes, that seems to be their focus. It's that idea of forgiveness that's in that. But really, that forgiveness existed before the crucifixion. So you don't have to sit there and think of these morbid things, that morbid aspect of it. Just remember Jesus forgiving the adulterous woman, and telling them, whoever of you has not sinned, why don't you cast the first stone? There's grace, him raising Lazarus from the dead, him making the blind see again, him making the walk, him telling the sinner, go your way, your faith has made you well. These are the things that we remember in Christ. Much more important than the death is the life. The life is what was summarized in that death. This divine love, God's message to you: I will do anything to reach you. I will do everything that I have ever requested of you and more to demonstrate to you that there is no limit to my commitment to your success, my commitment to your freedom, to your liberation, right? From the worldly self that has confused us. Religious persons put up with and accept willingly whatever they are commanded to do. But the neglectful and lukewarm are always in difficulty and have great anguish besides, for they lack interior comfort and cannot seek it outside. All right, so let's see. Religious persons put up with and accept willingly whatever they are commanded to do. All right, that's faith. You just there's non-resistance. Whatever the moment delivers to you, you surrender to the divine principle. You react in love, you react in wisdom. And that is different for every moment. But it doesn't have to be calculated in the mind because it belongs to your nature. And if you are still and silent and withdrawn from the sense of egoism, the sense of separateness from God, then that reverberating principle will express in your actions, thoughts, and words, right? But the neglectful and lukewarm, they're always in difficulty, right? Because you can't take refuge in God if you know that you've got places reserved for yourself where God is not within, where you count on distraction, right? Where you count on distraction for things to happen. If you've got those spaces inside, if you've got other things that you take refuge in the world, in worldly things, then you're going to be in difficulty. You're not going to have that inner peace. You're not going to have that oasis that you can go to and feel secure, right? Because there are places that you haven't allowed grace and the presence to enter, to heal, and to inspire you, right? And so if you are lukewarm and neglectful of your spiritual practices, you're going to have great difficulty and anguish beside, for you will lack that interior comfort and you cannot seek it outside. It can't come to you from the outside. That's what distinguishes a worldly person from a spiritual person. A worldly person finds all of their comfort outside themselves. Finds all of their comfort in distraction, in pleasure, in things that take your mind off of your troubles and problems. That's seeking it outside, and that's the only help you can get outside is distraction. It can't heal you. But living in the divine presence sometimes is uncomfortable because of the truth of what we're involved in, or whatever our condition is. But it's in dealing with that through the acceptance of grace, through a mature accepting of grace, and through our inner discernment, that we're led to the private chamber of the heart, where peace, interior peace, the peace that passes understanding, has been waiting for us, is always sitting there prepared. I have prepared the way for you. It's already done. There is a space within you where all the spiritual work is finished. But you have to move your identity there. You have to move it out of egoism, out of mind, and into this space, the divine principle, the divine presence, the presence of God. Undisciplined persons who seek to be released from their duties will always be in trouble, for nothing will ever satisfy them. These are some very powerful verses right here. They're uncomfortable. There's no doubt. But there's some help in them. You can kind of see how it goes along. Being undisciplined, wanting not to do your duties, not to do the things that you need to do. So you keep putting them off, and, you play one more game of solitaire, or you sit there and flip through, a few more pages of Reddit. It kind of keeps your mind distracted, and you can kind of put off what you need to do. He says, but what is the fruit of that? If you give yourself permission to live like that, what's he say? You're always going to be in trouble, because you're not doing the things that you need to do. So that stress is always going to be there, because you're not getting around to doing them. So you're always going to be in trouble, and nothing's going to satisfy you because of that trouble that you're causing for yourself. That putting off of doing what's necessary, of doing what's helpful, of doing whatever you need to be doing. Consider the strict life that others lead, who are bound by the rules of the cloister. They seldom go out, live in retirement, eat sparingly, are poorly clothed, work hard, speak little, keep long vigils, rise early, pray much, read often, and discipline themselves. I'd like to meet that person. I actually think I lived with one of them, at least, in San Francisco there. So look, this is a nice list of things here of what you can do with your life when you're bored. Here's how to take care of your boredom with spiritual ideals, right? Go out seldomly. Don't go out into the world and get yourself excited by all of the noise and decoration out there. Live in retirement, which means, keep yourself quiet. Don't do things to excite the mind, right? Eat sparingly. There it is. Are poorly clothed. Well, I don't think it's that bad. But, you're not going to go running out. Like, I walked down when I was in Rome. Oh my God, that was pretty hilarious. When I was in Rome, I didn't have a rain jacket. It was pouring a couple of times, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna buy a rain jacket. And so we happened to be in this part of town, which turned out to be, as we were walking down this road, all the great designer boutiques were there. All the big names where it's the kind of place you walk in and they've got shelves that only have like 3 things on them, and like hangers with like 4 things on them. And you go over and look at a price tag, it's like $8,000 for a t-shirt. Well, I didn't know what part of town I was in, and I didn't know most of those names. And so I went into that store, that sales lady didn't even come over and talk to me. didn't say a thing to me. Just, when I asked her if she had raincoats, she was like, yeah, over there. she knew that I wasn't going to buy that raincoat, that as soon as I looked at that price tag, I was going to fall over and crawl out of the crawl out of the boutique. So that was the first place. The second one I went into, I went up to the lady and I asked about the raincoat that was in the front window. And the first thing she says out of her mouth, 8,000 euros. Right? So I was like, but I'm kind of embarrassed because I didn't give in. I said, yes, I'd like to try it on. And then then her attitude toward me, I got myself stuck because then she started bringing out all this long flow of different types of raincoats and started giving me all kinds of attention for it. And so then I had to backtrack and get out of the store. Anyway, but so don't expose yourself to that kind of thing. Don't get your mind twisting in that world, because it really twists your mind. There's no doubt. Even that little experience, I was walking down that street and I felt so cut off, so disrespected, like, and it's just an ugly feeling inside. It's like, wow. And that's how we get trapped. That's how the world pulls us into their nonsense. Right. So, so consider the strict life of these people. They seldom go out, live in retirement, eat sparingly, are poorly clothed, work hard, speak little, keep long vigils, rise early, pray much, read often, and discipline themselves. Right? Now, if you try and do all those things as bullet items, one after the other, it's going to be a rather stressful engagement for you. Know that this is the life you will live as you purify the mind. As you remove the senses of me and mine from the mind, this is what will naturally begin to take the place within you. You'll read often because you enjoy being in the scriptures. You enjoy the company of the divine presence. You won't go out much because you don't need much. You're content to be, you're content to be in your own space. You'll work hard. Why? Because you're doing karma yoga. Everything is done for its own sake in the moment and offered to the beloved. So you're focused and you're working. You live in retirement, right? Because you're not actively seeking any fulfillment of some, what is that when somebody really is, God, I can't even think of the word. When you really want to become something, you are, when you get a job and you're really trying hard to work to the top, you are, nobody knows this word.
I would say determined, but that's anything.
Well, determined, yes, but there's a word for it. When you are focused on becoming something, you really want big stuff for yourself. You are very, oh, please. It's right there in my mind and I just can't get it. Here comes Sarah.
Yeah, ambitious, Swami.
Ambitious.
There you go.
Thank you, you worthless lot.
Ambidextrous.
Ambitious, yes. Ambitious means that you're dwelling firmly in ego, because the ego is ambitious because it needs to constantly fill the holes in its boat. Right? So they speak little because you're humble. You know that there's not a whole lot to be said. Spiritual life is fairly straightforward and fairly simple, and your mind is on the beloved, and you only speak through inspiration. Keep long vigils. I'm not sure what that is. Keeping long vigils, I guess. What are those practices where they stay up all night, or I guess maybe in that way. Rise early, pray much, read often, and discipline yourself. These are all natural things. These are all natural things for us once the purity of the mind is beginning, right? But we have only one real duty. And if it's done right, all of the others will follow. And that is to live constantly in the presence of the beloved, to live constantly in the awareness of grace, the awareness of God. And if we do that, all of these other things will take care of themselves. through that faith and through that company and through that grace. And so don't go running after things one after the other. There's a lot of anxiety there, and when you accomplish them, there's a lot of pride waiting for you. So commend yourself to God's presence, and all these things will come more and more.
So you should actually focus on the being and not on the doing.
Yes, absolutely, 110%. Sit there and focus on the presence of God within you, and in the moment that will spontaneously inspire you to right action.
Yeah.
To do the right thing. And even if you don't do anything, if you're sitting there in the presence of God, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the doing is not for us.
Yeah.
Right? The doing is for the divine. Ours is to listen and be actuated by that listening.
Yeah.
By being in the presence. All right, so we'll stop there for today. Let me